In reality, many of them are not even at the table, but on the menu of traditional finance as banks are moving into the crypto sector, offering services and eating those companies slowly up.
Is compliance and policy helping the industry as a whole, or is it holding it back a little bit? And it's so diverse for you guys.
Yeah, look,
How do you interpret that?
in a few years, we'll look back at these days and remember those like a honeymoon days with zero regulation, because the amount of new laws that are coming in place is just incredible.
I see it as like a two-way street, where there's the misconceptions that the crypto world has of compliance and policy, and then there's misconceptions that governments and policymakers have of crypto. What do you think is a misconception that kind of still is there?
And MiCA is in many sense yesterday's news. I see crypto as an institutional play, a B2B play, and in some respects it's a luxury good.
Hi everyone, my name is Sébastien Marque, VP of Strategy at Luna PR, and today I'm joined by Mykolas Majauskas from Bybit on today's episode of Tech It or Leave It podcast. Absolute honor.
Thank you for inviting me. My name is Mykolas Majauskas. I'm a global head of policy at Bybit.
Okay, so I'll jump into my first question. It's a bit of a broad one. I want you to let us know what you think in the last, I'll say a year, 2 years. A lot has changed in the industry in that time period. I want to know from your vantage point, which is pretty unique, what is the one change internal to Bybit that you've seen that the public just doesn't know about or hasn't been aware of?
Look, if we take a step back, for several years we've seen original crypto gangsters talking how they will be, disrupting traditional finance like never before. But
Sure.
in reality, many of them are not even at the table, but on the menu of traditional finance as banks are moving into the crypto sector, offering services and eating those companies slowly up.
Yeah.
And if you want to earn yourself, get yourself a place at the table, you have to build new products, bring new services to the clients. And although as Bybit we've been really successful so far, to keep on growing, we need to build new things. And that's why we're launching one financial platform whereby people would have a single IBAN, which would link to your card. You'll be getting your salary there. You'll be paying, saving, managing your wealth, transferring money, all under one hood, under one financial platform. So we're building new products that would be at intersection of the traditional finance and the digital industry.
Yeah. Amazing. I'd say about a year ago, we were working with you guys on at the launch of the Bybit card in Brazil and Argentina. And there was a huge push there on retail for that particular product. But Bybit's so global. In terms of compliance, you guys are playing on so many different and have to be compliant on so many different jurisdictions. And I want your opinion on one of the topics, or a question that you get a lot on panels is compliance and policy helping the industry as a whole, or is it holding it back a little bit? And it's so diverse for you guys.
Yeah, look,
how do you interpret that?
If we look at the life that we have right now, and I hear a lot of crypto companies complaining about that, there's too much regulation. But in a few years, we'll look back at these days and remember those like a honeymoon days with zero regulation, because the amount of new laws that are coming in place is just incredible. And we'll have to comply. We'll have to learn. We'll have to learn to build around it and operate within those frameworks for a very simple reason. And Bybit realized that very early on. If we take, what crypto community has built is stablecoins. Stablecoins is money. Governments have been issuing, supervising, regulating money for thousands of years before, and quite likely they'll continue to do so in the future. So be able to operate within that framework and that industry of money, you have to comply. And that's why we've been trying to make sure that every single market that we're present, we're 100% compliant, and we focus on compliance first approach. So within Europe, we were one of the first ones to get markets in crypto asset license early last year. One of the first global exchanges to get it. Now we're in the process to get electronic money institution license, MiFID license, brokerage license, which would allow us to serve much more for our customers. And MiCA is in many sense yesterday's news. If we want to build new products, new opportunities, we need to get new licenses.
Sure.
Same things we see in Latin America, and whilst in Europe we're always see crypto as an institutional play, a B2B play. In some respects, it's a luxury good, but in Latin America, people use it daily to save money, to transfer money, to pay. For me as a crypto person, it's really opening to be in Latin America and see it actually used every day. Governments seem to be open as well. And we're in contact with many Latin America authorities and working together, ensuring that our platforms are fully compliant. So it's a process. Governments are learning and doing it really well, I would say. Compliment them. That you would take 2 or 3 years back. Now it's a completely different environment.
Yeah, I want to. Unbelievably interesting. I want to pivot and on your last point. I feel like you're uniquely positioned to answer this question. Is the concept of policy and compliance between crypto as an industry and kind of like the institutional and governmental side. I see it as like a two-way street where there's the misconceptions that the crypto world has of compliance and policy, and then there's misconceptions that governments and policymakers have of crypto. I'm sure that over the last few years, you've seen so many of those misconceptions kind of get broken down, and you've played a role in helping that happen. What do you think is a misconception that kind of still is there, that is still remaining to be broken down between these two kinds of worlds?
Often when I get asked, what do I do as a policy person, I try to explain it that, my day is broken in two parts. The first part is I try to explain to authorities what is crypto, to the regulators.
Sure.
And then the other part of the day, I try to explain to crypto people what is authorities and what is regulator. And I think that matching the two has been easier and easier because there's much more understanding right now. And one of the elements that both the governments, authorities, regulators, and the industry is beginning to learn is around tokenization.
Okay.
There's no private issuer of stable coins that would be able to serve the global scale of tokenized equity markets. We see huge issuers of stable coins, which is great, that they're serving the purpose, really good, Circle and Ripple and many other different organizations. But if we want to tokenize capital markets at scale, the government digital money to be used for settlement might be crucial. We see that in China. So CBDCs, Chinese government is supporting that to be used as a settlement asset for tokenization and settlement of equity, tokenized equities in Hong Kong. So through the channel of Hong Kong being the gateway.
Sure.
We see that in Europe. Here now today, where by the government and the central bank, digital euro might be used on the wholesale, the large-scale B2B settlement. And I think that this is a very important element where the private sector is realizing that government-issued stablecoin, government-issued digital currency has a very important role to play. So the private sector realizes, and the authorities understand that as well, that they have a role to play. And that collaboration, I believe, is really powerful. US is going a slightly different way with the private sector stablecoin strategy, but they have a political agenda behind it, which is working really successfully for them, dollarizing emerging markets and also reducing the cost of treasuries, because whenever you issue stablecoins in US, you have to, or you can keep a certain element of fiat deposited with the treasuries, so you create an additional demand for treasuries, reduces the interest rates for the government to borrow. So, this intersection between governments and private sector is evolving, and I see some tangible results there.
Amazing. I won't phrase it as who's lagging behind. What I will do is I'll ask you, who do you think, in terms of regions, in terms of jurisdictions, maybe governments, or even a country, if I ask you who on your day-to-day job feels like they're ahead or they're pushing things forward a bit quicker than the rest, I won't ask you who's lagging
look,
but who's doing it the
I'm
right
Lithuanian.
way.
I'm European,
Sure.
so I'm allowed to complain about Brussels. Not too much, a little, but daily.
Sure.
And what I would say that whilst Brussels is building regulatory sandboxes,
Okay.
US is going straight for the beach.
Gotcha.
If we look at venture capital investment, 50% of that is placed within the US. Yeah. If we look at the money market funds, exchange traded funds, if we look at recent initiatives by NASDAQ and New York Stock Exchange on bringing blockchain as a core infrastructure for the capital markets, this is really significant. Yeah. Now, within EU, we have DLT pilot regime, which has limitation of products on scale and also has limitations on the time frame. So it's like 6 years. Sure. So if you get the DLT pilot regime license, what do you do in 6 years? So if you're raising capital, for the investors, they'll naturally ask you what happens in 6 years. So I see some limitations there. Nevertheless, the real competence of digital asset industry is within Europe at scale. The governments, there's so much expertise there, so much understanding. And they were the first movers with the markets and crypto assets regulation globally. And many of the governments now are copying some of the good parts, some of the bad parts, but they're copying what Europe has done. So Europe has been the first mover, has the competence to lead. It needs a little bit of ambition to take it to the next stage. And I believe that when European leaders see what's happening in US and happening in Asia, I believe that motivation is growing. So I'm really bullish on Europe, and I believe that US is actually leading the race right now.
Amazing, awesome. As a Frenchman, I understand we're allowed to complain about Europe a little bit,
but daily.
Okay, so my next question is about kind of, we're all from very different. We're all in this industry. We're all operating at very different vantage points. As a PR agency, our client base and the people that we work with is a reflection of where the market is moving, right? So when RWAs become a main topic, when agentic AI becomes a main topic, when institutionalization is at the forefront, we feel it, right? But it's often reactionary because companies will react to whatever's the industry is heading towards. My question to you is, if we were to talk again in a year, what is something that we've seen, for example, exchanges go public on the NASDAQ, New York Stock Exchange, etc. A year ago, I think the vast majority of the industry would have been very surprised by that. What do you think in a year's time when we talk together again, what will have happened that would have surprised me today?
I don't know. I can't say how the world will look like in a year's time, but I can surely say of what is happening right now at speed. So AI implementation is just something incredible that happens in many different layers within the global organizations, and including Bybit. So we use AI for internal forecasting, auditing, reporting, internal, then customer service, then transaction monitoring, sanction screening, market forecasting as an external trading tool, AI trading, AI bot trading. So many different layers, and it's not the product in itself. Is like an electricity that powers the products that we use. And I believe that this will really change how companies operate. And when the tide is out, we'll clearly see who's been swimming naked and who's not been using AI. And I believe that it is really important that the companies implement it within their core structure, not as pilots, but within their core structure as layers for particular sections of what they do. And a lot of that is going under the hood. Whilst previously we've been seeing that our users are interacting themselves with AI. I think in the future we'll see that the user will say, look, create me a trading strategy based on my patterns, on my risk profile, on my investment horizon, and AI will do all of it. You'll just have to speak to it, and we'll do it for you. So I think a lot of the crypto functionality, a lot of AI elements will go under the hood, and the user facing will be much more simple. I think that's number one. Number two, we see a proper scale up of stable coins. And it's not just a miracle in itself. Is if it were cheaper to use pigeons to send money, we'll use pigeons. But now it's blockchain, and we have stable coins that make it cheaper, quicker, more simple to manage treasuries, to send money, to transfer, to pay, and that's why we're in collaboration with many stable coin issuers, and I believe that this will become the core part of the financial market and the intersection of the traditional finance and digital asset industry. And the next element is tokenization. And again, we've been talking about tokenization for years now. The scale is still not there. Okay. And if we look at, taking out the stable coins, just pure tokenized real world assets, 30, 40 billion compared to 120 trillion of equity markets, so 0.0%. So we're still not there. The scale is not there that, but what we see in the US is really taking off. In Europe, governments, authorities, institutions, BaFin, European Securities Market Authority, are really putting the thought together on how to push it forward. So I'm really bullish on Europe and tokenization as well. So I believe that those several elements will impact a lot of what we do. We see a lot of new products like prediction markets coming in play. Of course. Many people talk about it, but the regulation there is not here yet, especially within Europe. You need to get all different licenses, and I'm not sure whether the global exchanges will go for this, because mostly it's going to be gambling licenses here. Yeah. So many different products which don't necessarily relate to what Bybit do, but I see that we'll have a somewhat different market within a year's time, depending and based on the inputs that we have right now.
Amazing, awesome. Last question. You mentioned before we kicked off the interview that you live in a plane, that you're traveling everywhere, you're busy, you've got a million different things that you guys at Bybit are working on. What is, if you had to single out the one thing that keeps you up and motivated and excited, what is that one thing?
Yeah, I'm Lithuanian. I'm based on the plane, economy class, that fly from place to place and meet institutions and governments. The things that motivate me is I know that we're building meaningful things. It's not just about making money. It's about doing something meaningful that helps to develop a better business model. It helps ordinary people to save money. And we look at have a look at the wealth management industry. A lot of it for years has been about making you feel wealthy as opposed to actually building your wealth. And now people would like to own the decisions that they make about managing their own wealth. How to invest, where to invest. At the end of the day, it's becoming more interesting to manage your own money. And offering these type of products for everyday people makes your life much more meaningful.
Amazing, awesome. Anything those were my questions. Anything that we haven't touched on that you'd want to talk about?
No, I'm very pleased to be here, and thank you for having me.
Mykolas, thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure.